time and market. Like, don't try to launch a company in the US and sit in New Zealand and hope for the best, Like, I used to do trips there, build a big network, come back and start sending emails, and it just doesn't work. So if you are interested in a bigger market, just go spend some time on the ground. It's all the in-betweens. You might be going for one event, but I guarantee your highlight of the thing that moves the needle was something unplanned, or you happen to be in the right place at the right time, or you're going for a walk and stumbled across something you wouldn't have found otherwise. A lecturer explained that everything is designed. So if you look out the window, the way a city works, the clothes people wear, what's on a menu, cars, everything is designed. So if something's broken or causing harm, we can redesign it. And I think that opened my mind up to realizing that if there's a problem, we can actually fix it. Money is cheap. Businesses need money to operate, but who you bring on and who you give money to is just so important. Ensuring the values align, not 95% of values, but like 100% of values align. Something we realize in our industry is common sense isn't very common anymore. Being willing to go against the grain, be curious, and not accept that's just the way it is ever. Just being willing to challenge the status quo over and over again and not rest on your laurels is probably another thing. I think it's easy to achieve one thing, to make one thing better and then leave it there. But I think the idea of continuously challenging things is really important.
Hi, and welcome back to Care Beyond Profits. I'm Azura Ali. In this episode, I'm joined by Jayden Klinac. Jayden is the founder for the Better Good Group Limited. Jayden has spent the last 10 years solving the issue of plastics. His current solution is free water when you buy an annual plant-based reusable bottle. In this conversation, Jayden shares his experience navigating poor mentorship, misaligned investor relationships, and the mental health challenges that came from building his first company without values alignment. We also dive into his experience on expanding to the US market and his thoughts on what it's like to build a business that truly cares for people and the planet. I appreciate you tuning in. If this speaks to you, please like, share, and subscribe to Care Beyond Profits. And why not share this with someone who might benefit? Supporting this channel helps us to keep these value-based conversations going. Thank you. Let's get into it. Jayden, thank you so much for jumping on the show today.
Nice, thanks for having me.
For our listeners, if someone was to meet you outside of your work and they didn't know you, they didn't know your CV, can you explain to us who is this human behind the name Jayden?
Good question. I'm from Wellington originally. I grew up there till I was about 18. And when I left school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I got a one-way ticket to London by myself and spent 12 months traveling around Europe. I came back and then went to university down in Otago, and I studied consumer and applied sciences, and then started my first business a couple of weeks before I graduated. We launched the first compostable plant-based coffee capsule for espresso machines back in 2012. And then for the last 10 years, I've been focusing on how to solve the plastic crisis that bottled water and plastic, glass, and aluminum bottles create. And in between that, I surf, I enjoy yoga, I love traveling, and that probably sums me up pretty well as a quick couple of minutes.
Behind every founder and CEO, there's always a story behind how you grew up and what made you who you are today. So for our listeners, starting with when you were down in Wellington, you were born, tell us a little bit more about what was the environment that was shaping you.
So I'm from a family of four, and my older brother's adopted, and then me and my younger brother and younger sister we were born to my mum and my dad. So we're quite a big family. My little brother's got autism and dyspraxia, and he's got a few little things that make him wonderful. So there was never really a dull moment in my household growing up. But yeah, I think coming from a big family and having lots of diversity in how people saw the world and how the world treated different people in my family was quite interesting. But I don't know. I had a lovely childhood, and I was always quite curious. I remember probably my earliest memory is probably almost getting kicked out of kindergarten because we had a big metal slide at kindy, which was about 2 stories down, and one you'd always get stuck on it. You'd always like stick to your skin, and you couldn't go very fast. So one day I thought it'd be a good idea to go get a pot of blue dye and start pouring it down, and lined all the kindy kids up. So it made us go really fast, and it solved the problem. But I obviously wasn't aware of washing and stains back then.
Did they actually kick you out? I'm curious when you did that.
I think mum lost a few friends.
Oh, no.
Because there was probably a few ruined outfits, but I managed to stay in kindy and made it all the way to primary school. But I never saw myself as like an academic, I guess, and my school definitely didn't see me as an academic. My school asked me to leave in sixth form because I was letting grades down, but it wasn't so much that I couldn't do the work, as I said earlier. I just wasn't interested. And I don't know, I was in the NCEA system, so if I wrote an essay and I passed, I got an achieved, and I got, say, 10 credits, where they'd expect you to do more work to get an excellence, but you still only got 10 credits. And that just didn't make any sense to me. So I found it hard to kind of do this pointless work for this goal of actually not achieving or making the world a better place, just getting a different word. And I think school didn't really like that. So, but if I was interested in something, I actually really enjoyed English, and I enjoyed business studies. I enjoyed different parts of school, then I'd do well in it. But most classes at school didn't really interest me, and most of the things they did just seemed like a bit of a waste of time. So I actually ended up working 40 hours a week in my seventh form. I'd work every day after school filling bins of nuts at a supermarket, and I'd work at Hull Pizza on the weekend to save enough money so I could get over to Europe when I was 18. And I think spending 12 months in Europe by yourself as an 18, turned 19 over there year old, it just really opened my mind to different cultures. I think growing up in Horriua, you think that there's one way to go about the world, and you think if X happens, then Y happens, and this is what you eat, and this is how you think, and this is how you respond to this circumstance. We're going and seeing 15, 20 different countries do it differently all in a year as an 18-year-old just made me realize that things aren't set in stone. And things aren't just the way they are, and there's plenty of ways to approach the world and do things. And so I think that was quite a big year for me. And obviously I've just been pretty committed to learning ever since, and staying curious, and I'm not ever really willing to kind of just settle for something being the way it is.
Nice. And where did you start? So in terms of, you started in Wellington, and then what led you to where you are today? Because how did you realize that this is what you wanted to do?
Probably from realizing I had no idea what I wanted to do. When I finished school, I was actually told at school in sixth form to leave and go get a trade, because I probably wouldn't do too well at university. I probably wasn't the best student at school. Not so much naughty, but just didn't apply myself unless I really enjoy something. I find it hard to focus on it. So for getting grades for the sake of grades never really applied to me at school, or didn't really fit with how my brain works. So when I finished school, I'd saved up money, and I got a one-way ticket to London. I traveled Europe because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then when I got back, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went to university thinking that I'd probably fail, but it would be fun. And I ended up actually really enjoying it, probably because I got to pick what I focused on. And towards the end of my degree, I was living with 15 boys in a 13-bedroom house in Dunedin. And one of them got an espresso coffee machine. And in my bedroom, I had a espresso coffee machine and a record player. Like, I was very analog, which I still am in parts of my life today. And I just found this machine really fascinating. It could make a really good really good coffee. It could make a coffee with crema. Didn't taste very good. But the thing I also noticed was the bin next to the coffee machine kept filling up with these little shiny capsules. So I got quite curious, and I looked into them, and it was probably the first time I had the thought, where do things go when we throw them in the bin? And I realized, the inside was an organic compound. It was coffee. The outside was aluminium. One was recyclable, one was compostable. But because they were bound together, they had to go to landfill. And I had a bit of an insight in my first year of university, where a lecturer explained that everything is design. So if you look out the window, the way a city works, the clothes people wear, what's on a menu, cars, everything is designed. So if something's broken or causing harm, we can redesign it. And I think that opened my mind up to realizing that if there's a problem, we can actually fix it. Where before, if there was a problem, it was like, damn, it's a problem. So when I kind of learned this about these capsules and the problem they were causing by going to landfill, I thought, well, maybe we can design this and do it better. And I really went back to nature to get some ideas on how to do it. A leaf drops trees every year, which we would treat as waste in our society, but actually it's designed in a way where it can re-enter the system and become a nutrient for another cycle. So I thought, how can we do that with coffee capsules? And the inside was coffee, as explained, really high in nitrogen. How does compost work? It's nitrogen and carbon. So I thought if we built the outside out of carbon, we'd have a little compost bomb, or how nature deals with its waste. And that was how our first company was born. And I ran that for 3 years and realized that coffee capsules are kind of a stupid product, but it was really cool that we could do this. It was cool that we could design out of plastic, glass, and aluminium. So then I went back to the books and said, well, what's the biggest problem? Where can we have the most impact, knowing what we know with that we can develop new materials? And it was just plastic bottles, or glass bottles, or aluminium bottles, any bottles over and over again were the ones ending up in the ocean, clogging landfills, also health issues. So I thought, well, that's probably the best place to focus, is where the biggest problem was. And since 2015, I've focused on bottles and making them better from environmental angles, from health angles, from pure functionality, from a design standpoint, and kind of looked at every negative element of that industry and tried to replace the negatives with positives. And I'm still doing it today.
So when you started your first company, what did you do with it when you decided to pivot there?
We launched that company and kind of did nothing for 3 or 4 months. I didn't understand how to run a business. I didn't understand marketing. I didn't understand anything. So we probably did a few $100s worth of sales from friends and family who probably felt sorry for us. And then after 3 or 4 months, we got an article in the Herald. We did $5,000 that day. Harvey Norman had been ignoring us, all the samples we sent them, but then the general manager called me that same day and we got a big Harvey Norman deal. We scaled really quickly, brought on some money from an investor who I thought might become a mentor. Like, I was 2021, I had no idea what I was doing. I wanted someone to help teach me, and that investor ended up not being a very good mentor or person. And after suffering from probably mental health from treatment of certain people and just the way things ended up going, I walked away from the business. So I still own a shareholding, but I haven't done anything with the business. I haven't received anything from the business. I've just left that sit. I took the learnings with me and went and built another company, which I built very differently based on protecting equity and taking the mistakes I learned from that experience and applying them for the Better Good Group, which I founded in 2015, 2016, and we're still running it today. So, it was some powerful lessons.
Do you want to share some of your lessons with our listeners? Because most of them are probably going through, the founder experience, and it would be valuable to hear from yourself.
Yeah, I think, look, just values. Money is cheap. I think it's, businesses need money to operate, but who you bring on and who you give money to is just so important. And ensuring the values align, not 95% of values, but like 100% of values align. Every business I've started or been involved in, I've seen that I want to do that for the rest of my life. I've never said I want to start something, make a whole lot of money and leave. And even that's a value in itself, but it's also a mindset that you take into something. You do things very differently when it's a long-term project versus a short-term project. And I didn't understand any of these principles, I guess, back then. I just thought, well, we've got a good product. We've got some opportunities to grow. We need some money. Let's put the money in. I also wanted a mentor. And, maybe you can't really be a better judge of character as a lesson, but I just think not putting blinders on to achieve one goal when you actually need to view things holistically is pretty important. But I've definitely had a few experiences where the values probably weren't there and I ignored it in order to take a step, but it ends up being 1 forward and 20 backwards. So just making sure if you're going into business with someone that you're doing it for the right reasons, you believe in the right things, you see the same future, and that they're just a genuinely good person, because things will go wrong and there will be challenges, but if you've got the right person by your side, just like a good romantic relationship, it will strengthen the connection and not break it. So that's probably the key thing, and just protecting your equity. I see a lot of founders maybe romanticizing raising capital and romanticizing selling equity, and it's not. Hold on to as much as you can for as long as you can, and you need to put fuel in the tank, but do it with the right people and in the right way, and value yourself and value your business, and don't sell it short because it's your life and you're the one that's kind of getting up every day and putting blood, sweat, and tears into it. So yeah, there's probably a couple. I mean, there's so many lessons, but that covers the key ones.
Thank you, Jayden. You touched on a really good point there on values. It's something that we always talk about on this podcast. If I was to ask you to describe 3 of your top values, what would they be and why?
Just making products that actually make sense. I think something we realize in our industry is common sense isn't very common anymore, and making products that came out of a genuine need or gap in your life or a genuine problem that you were having. So I think a value is probably just, not as making useful products for the world that are going to make the world a better place. And being willing to go against the grain, be curious, not accept that's just the way it is ever. And just being willing to challenge the status quo over and over again, and not rest on your laurels is probably another thing. I think it's easy to achieve one thing, to make one thing better and then leave it there. But I think the idea of continuously challenging things is really important. And why is probably because I think industries are a bit comfortable. The big guys are really comfortable. They're doing what they're doing for a long time. It's a profitable system. Making single-use plastic bottles is really profitable. But does it make sense to use a material that took millions of years to build up in the ground and is going to take thousands of years to break down in nature for a 5-minute drink? No. So just not accepting those things, even though that is what is happening today, and that's what the big guys are doing. And I think just being bold enough to challenge those things, so you can, even if you fail, you can kind of be proud of your attempts at creating real change.
Absolutely. And if you were to look at yourself when you were the younger Jayden and look at yourself now, was there a theme that's been there throughout the process, or somebody that's always been there for you during all of your pivots in your life?
I think it's been probably just what I touched on, and I don't know where it comes from. I don't think it's a conscious thought, but if I see something that doesn't make sense, and I also know based on my learnings it can be done better, I find it pretty hard to avoid or annoy it. Like once I see something, I find it pretty hard just to ignore it. Maybe a good example is our compostable bottles that we developed and launched back in 2018. Our goal at the start was to remove fossil fuels out of plastic. Like, it's really stupid that we're using fossil fuels to make plastic, or we don't have to. We can use renewable resources. So that was the only goal. And when we achieved that goal, we had this fossil fuel free bottle completely made out of plants. But then I realized there was a lot of toxins and BPAs and things in the material. So then that wasn't part of the plan, but then we worked to remove them and make a completely non-toxic bottle. And then we realized that recycling was a little bit flawed and actually doesn't really work very well as a model. It's the best we've got at the moment, but it's the ambulance at the bottom of the hill. It's not going to save the plastic problem. So we've ensured those bottles could be composted, which was never part of the plan. But again, we worked to make them compostable because we saw it could be done better and it was possible. Then once we developed this plant-based, non-toxic compostable bottle, we went to launch it onto the market and we realized there was no collection for compostables in New Zealand. So it was going to end up in landfill. Banana peels weren't even getting collected to be composted, which was stupid in itself. So we built an entire compost network throughout New Zealand to collect these bottles back and to start collecting food waste from businesses and houses to get into compost piles. And then we got given a report to say that there's 108 compost facilities in New Zealand and 13 of them could accept our packaging. So once we started sending our bottles we collected to these facilities, suddenly they couldn't accept the packaging, or they wouldn't. So then we built 6 of our own compost sites throughout New Zealand. So suddenly what started as trying to make a fossil fuel-free bottle and being a packaging or a bottle company, we're suddenly running and building compost sites, which was never part of the plan. We then converted 2 of those compost sites into urban farms. One of them was feeding 40 families. They had about 70 different varieties of food growing on it. We employed full-time farmers. We employed full-time composters. We had community days. We had schools coming through to learn about regenerative agriculture. We were trying to track how much carbon we could sequester in the soil and how much bird life and bugs we could bring back. So there's just this theme, I guess, of um, anytime something just doesn't make sense or could be done better, we'll give it a crack and do what we think might be the best solution. And that's probably been there from the start and continues today, but it's never been a conscious decision. I guess that's just how I think.
And where were all of these composting sites? Would you like to just explain to the audience a little bit more on, where did you start? What's the location? Where did it expand to?
Yeah, the first one was in Wellington. So we found a old bowling green just down the road from where I grew up in Porirua, actually in Cannons Creek. And there was a bowling green that had been dormant for 7 years. It was in an interesting area, and there had been a charity that was trying to teach this low decile community how to cook nutritious meals for under $10 to improve the nutrition of the community, which is really beautiful and a really cool purpose and mission that they had. And they took over the club rooms, but there was this whole bowling green. It was a quarter acre, and we found it and asked if we could take over it to start composting, and they agreed. And we dug it up, and because they put so much nitrates and chemicals on these bowling greens to keep them the way they need to bowl on them, there was only a tiny amount of soil, and it was grey and dead, and then it was all sand. So at the start of 2019, we started composting there. We built a compost site. We started collecting food from families. We started collecting food from businesses. We had all our bottles we were getting back from festivals and cafes and our collection sites. And that year, I think, I'd have to check, we made about 20,000 kgs of compost or something. We made a lot of compost on the site. And then suddenly we had all this compost. So we're like, well, what should we do with it? And we looked at donating it or putting it into the forest. We learned some really interesting statistics about how much carbon can be sequestered when you lay it out on grass. But we decided the best thing we could do was grow food. And so we started digging up the bowling green, and we put garden beds down, and we used compost, and we started growing and remediating the soil, and we started planting food. And then one day we had this lovely Canadian woman, Jess, who had been doing urban farming in Canada, turn up, and she was looking for a job, so we employed her. And suddenly we had a farmer, and we developed this whole site into this urban farm, which had a 19-tree orchard. It had about 25 garden beds, had a little patch where kids could come and learn to plant things and harvest food. We had school groups come through, and even to this day, that garden's still operating. As a community urban farm, we donated food into the charity for them to use in their cooking classes. Throughout COVID, we were doing home drop-offs to people we heard had lost their jobs. We were delivering food parcels. And it's just a really beautiful community space now. We did a second one in Wellington in partnership with Wellington Airport. So it was next to the airport. We were collecting bottles, coffee cups, food waste from the airport in the hotel, composting it on site. And then growing food as well. And then we had a couple down in Arrowtown, and we had a couple up in Auckland that were just pure composting sites. So we didn't have to ship bottles all around the country to get them composted.
And did you operate the charities as a separate trust, or was it under your company?
No, so it was all under the same company, although we did set up a charity or a not-for-profit called Edible Earth. That was set up during COVID, and the purpose of that was to help New Zealand live more regeneratively. So basically, it was a free resource where you could go on the website, you could learn what to plant and when, how to build a Klinac garden, a garden that could feed you more nutritious food, but also help rebuilding the soil and sequestering carbon, how to set up composting, how to compost. We had free videos, resources, and then we just built this little social enterprise and not-for-profit to try and help encourage people to compost their food scraps and to grow food at home and do these things that are not only healthy for us, but also really healthy for the environment. But all of it was funded through our bottle sales.
It sounds very beautiful. It's a whole economy that goes cycling back around, isn't it?
Yeah, it was interesting, I think it comes back to first principles and design. If you look at a plastic bottle, it's kind of flawed from the start. Like it's made from fossil fuels. They're pretty toxic. Recycling doesn't work. So when you make a plastic bottle, you've got this negative environmental and health lead up to make it. But then everything that comes from it, plastic in the ocean, microplastics, toxicities, endocrine disruptors, it all ends up these negative flow-on effects that were never planned. Where because we designed our system from the start for circularity, we had all these beautiful spin-offs that were never planned, like growing food and building soil and feeding people. They weren't part of the plan, but because we had such a good intention and good design at the start, even though we'd never planned that it would turn into what it did, everything was really positive. So it was quite interesting to witness how that worked out.
That's very powerful. And in terms of how you operate day to day, because wearing the hat of a CEO founder, it's always a lot of stress going on. The mind is, thinking about 10 different things all at once. How do you personally cope with all of that? What is your, I guess, go-to when you have to digest all of these thought processes? Do you have a practice that you follow? What helps you?
Oh yeah, you need many tools. I For the last probably 10 years, I've had a very dedicated yoga practice. I never say to lot or as much as I can. I make sure I'm exercising. I make sure I'm eating well. Just really trying to look after my mind and my body. I don't drink a lot. Like I'll have a drink here and there, but it's not a big part of my life. I gave up partying, a few years after uni probably. We'll still go and enjoy myself with friends, but I just prioritize my mind and my mental health over anything, really. I've done 3 or 4 yoga teacher trainings. I'm a trained breathwork facilitator. I've done a lot of things that I've found useful for myself, and never to teach other people, always just to know the deeper meaning for myself so I can kind of teach myself and regulate myself. And I actually find it gets easier. As you go on, you become more resilient. You realize that worrying is a waste of time. And I still worry, don't get me wrong, but it just things that used to really get me up in twists. Now I've been through them enough times. Like I've worked myself for coming on 14, 15 years now. And it's been some really dark and really, really hard times, but it did always work out to be okay. So just trying to apply those lessons for when it gets hard now, or when I start to worry or get anxious, just realizing I've been here before and being able to name it and being able to say, well, it worked out 10 out of 10 times every other time, and just trying to trust that, I guess. But I'm curious in philosophy, I'm curious in spirituality, I'm curious in lots of things to kind of take little bits from different parts of life and, just try to keep my mind stable and grounded. Is probably the simplest way to put it. But that looks in many different ways, and lifestyle's a big one.
Was there ever a cost to your decision when you had a set of values and there was there was something that came up and you had to actually walk away from it because of your values?
Oh, heaps, all the time, on many different levels. And I've had friendships that I've had to walk away from because values clashed or something went wrong, which is probably the worst. That's the one that probably hurts the most. But then at the time, it wasn't like a throwaway decision. It was a big process to get to that point of having to give that up. And it was really hard, and still is hard today. It's never nice for those things to happen. But over time, you realize that there wasn't any way forward, and you do have to accept it. We've turned down a lot of business. We've turned down a lot of money for the sake of making money because the alignment of the customer or the way they wanted us to go about something didn't make sense. I mean, look, when you have, I guess, mission-led business, when profit isn't your purpose, most weeks, there's something that comes up which causes you to pick or just remember why you're doing it. And yeah, I've done this for a long time and I want to do it for a long time more into the future. So it's not a hard decision. It's normally an easy decision, but yeah, like when it gets in between relationships and friendships and stuff, that's never nice. But I don't think anyone could probably walk this path without some sacrifice. There's always going to be something. But there's also a whole lot of rewards and benefits on the other side of it as well.
And how do you deal with that situation? Do you, with, for example, if it's a close friend or a close business partner, how have you dealt with it in the past?
Um, I mean, I haven't had a problem with a friend for a while, but it's hard. You know, humans are complicated, and you realize that you've got your version of events, they've got theirs. They're normally very different. And obviously, trying to align and trying to heal that relationship, trying to make it work is first and foremost. But sometimes it just can't, and it gets harder. And then other people get involved, and I don't think I have a process that I would ever pass on or one that I know works. I wouldn't say I'm perfect or very good at it. I don't know if anyone is, but just trying to do the best you can at the time. And it's always at the time because you get better at it and then you learn more. But I don't know. I don't wish that on anyone, and I don't know if there's a simple answer to say how to do that one way or another. Because yeah, I just don't have the answers, but it's they're pretty uncomfortable. Um,
Mm, absolutely. I think that's a really wise point there you've made. In terms of your navigating your business right now, in terms of the future, where do you see yourself going from here?
but we never set out to be a New Zealand-based company. Plastic's a global problem. Um, Bottles, even the downfalls of aluminium and glass, it's all global issues. So we've just launched in the US. We launched in Australia this summer. Really just trying to again, we found what the biggest problem was, and we're trying to solve that. Now we're looking at the biggest markets, and the US is probably one of the biggest markets in terms of the problem. So just trying to make sure these solutions are available. A big part of this was um, 10 years ago walking into a petrol station, needing to drink water and not having a choice not to buy an oil based plastic bottle that I was going to have to throw away that day. So, how can we at least provide people with an option if they don't want to buy an oil based plastic bottle, if they don't want to drink from something that's going to shed microplastics, if they don't want to contribute to warming the climate just because they're thirsty? So, to get our kind of reusable solutions in as many places or make them as accessible as possible is our focus at the moment. We're also still developing new materials as well. So we've got some really exciting stuff in the pipeline to make sure we're not resting on our laurels and continuing to challenge even what we're doing ourselves and to always be making it better.
In terms of your US market, what has been your biggest bottleneck to launching there?
The US is its own beast. I think it's easy to assume that because they speak English that they think the same as we do in New Zealand, which just isn't true. So when we launched there, I committed to going and spending as much time in the market as possible. So I actually brought an RV and I went and spent 3 months on the road. And I did something like 10 laps of New Zealand from north to south in 3 months. And just to talk to people, hang out in stores, try to get amongst the culture, to try to learn how they work and how they think, to be able to serve them better, to see what's important to them. And that's going to be an ongoing task. Um, and just continuing to try and understand the market. It's an expensive market, it's a complex market, and you need a really tight strategy. So there's lots of bottlenecks. There's new challenges every day, but we're committed to kind of just taking it one day at a time and doubling down on what's working, and also being radically honest with ourselves when something's not.
In terms of how far you travelled, where did you start and where did you end in your journey?
So I flew into San Francisco Airport. I brought the RV in Sacramento. So I got off the plane, got 2 trains up to Sacramento, slept in the RV outside this person's house, and then drove through the Mojave Desert and Death Valley down to the Grand Canyon at the top of Arizona. And then I worked my way down through Arizona, along the Mexican border, up in San Diego, up the coast of through Encinitas, Carlsbad, and into LA, and then went through Vegas to Utah, then came down through Joshua Tree back to San Diego, back to LA, and then finished up in San Francisco.
Oh, what an incredible ride. In terms of anything for those who are listening that are looking for advice and they're launching, what is something that you've learned in the last couple of years, I guess, in trying to go overseas?
Probably just time and market. Like, don't try to launch a company in the US and New Zealand and hope for the best. Like I used to do trips there, build a big network, come back and start sending emails, and it just doesn't work. So if you are interested in a bigger market, just go spend some time on the ground. It's all the in betweens. It's you might be going for one event, but I guarantee your highlight or the thing that moves the needle was something unplanned, or you happen to be in the right place at the right time, or you'll go for a walk and stumble across something you wouldn't have found otherwise. Um, so just getting feet on the ground and really trying to understand it from a first-hand perspective. Don't read reports or take advice by hire consultants. Just go. It's probably the best piece of advice they can get, and then break it into parts those chunks. Otherwise, it gets pretty overwhelming pretty quickly.
Do you think you're at a place where you're ready to navigate the next steps now, or where are you at now?
Oh, look, I'll never be in a place where I'm ready. We're always trying to push further than we should be, and that's how we, I guess, grow and quickly and keep a sense of urgency. The problems we're trying to solve aren't going anywhere; they're only getting worse. So waiting till you're ready is probably too late. I'm pretty comfortable now, just going and figuring it out on the way.
I want to pivot a little bit into other domains. So, for example, you've got tech, you've got capitals, you've got culture. Out of those, how are you navigating that now that you're growing as a company?
Trying to segment things into days, I think it's pretty easy to wake up and get so overwhelmed with all of the stuff you've got to do that you end up doing nothing. Or for me anyway, I don't know, I might be a little ADD or something. I find it pretty hard to focus at the best of times, as opposed to realizing there's a lot to do, but going, okay, but today I'm only going to achieve these 3 things, and I'm only going to do this one, and I'm not going to start that one until I'm done this one, and just working out how to channel my mind better. And that's been working really well for us. And then realizing what's the most important and triaging, if you like, taking a little leaf out of a doctor's book and going, well, this is actually the most important now. So at the moment we're raising capital and I need to almost block a lot of the other stuff out. It's still there. And if I get a rush of inspiration or something comes through, I'll open it and work on it. But realizing that I need to focus on raising capital and trying to trust that the team that we've built can handle the other things, making sure they feel supported, but really triaging and prioritizing. And because you're never going to get it all done. There's always a huge to-do list. It's never ending. And just accepting that and trying to focus on what's most important right now, day by day, is being pretty important.
Thank you. Before we close today, I want to ask you 2 questions. Firstly, if this was your last day on Earth, what would be your message to the world?
I hope it's not my last day on Earth. I think just have a good time, to be honest. It's when I first started this work, it was pretty hard not to get overwhelmed by the doom and gloom and the problems, and put your mission first at kind of all costs of health and joy and relationships. And I think now what I've realized is we're just actually here to enjoy ourselves. And if we enjoy ourselves and we're in a place of kind of joy and letting ourselves enjoy life rather than worrying and doubt and all the other things that come along if we don't, it doesn't actually matter. I think we're here for a pretty short time, and I think it's pretty easy to get swept up in a whole lot of stuff that in reality or in the scheme of things, joy is pretty important and probably the number one thing, and nothing else really matters if you strip it all back.
Thanks, Jayden. And finally, for the listeners, where can they find more about what you do and where can they follow you?
chooseanew.com is our website. There's plenty of information on there. Otherwise, Choose a New on Instagram. Yeah, or just reach out through our website as well. If you've got a specific question or want to know more about what we're doing, we'll always get back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jayden. It was such a pleasure having you today. Thank you for your time and sharing all your stories with us.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation and got as much out of it as I did. As always, if this episode speaks to you, please like, share, and subscribe to Care Beyond Profits. I appreciate you, and until next time, keep caring beyond profits.